Yeah, hello. My name is Andreas Bieler, and I'm a professor in political economy at the School of Politics and International Relations at the University of Nottingham. Many thanks to Clara for inviting me to give this presentation on economics for everyone, confronting the climate crisis, to United Union, the Grassroots Climate Justice Caucus. Now, let me just walk you through the structure of the presentation. First, I'm going to look at how we can understand political economy in contrast to economics as an academic discipline and what the consequences there are for our discussions. Then I'm going to contrast Keynesian versus neoliberal economics. Before I'm going to look at how these different economic sets of ideas, sets of theories, can be applied to the climate crisis. I'm going to conclude with a couple of summary remarks. Okay, political economy versus economics. Now, economists have a very particular self-understanding of their discipline. For them, economics is an objective science analyzing how the economy out there in the objective world works in reality. So it doesn't matter what they as scientists think themselves. Their task is to explain objective reality. Now that's very different from political economy. Here, we analyze the power structures which underpin particular economic discourses and policies. And so economic policy is nothing objective out there, but it really depends on the people who put these policies into practice. And there's a clear understanding that different economic theories are linked to different ways of how the economy is organized and in turn, different material interests. Yeah. So in political economy, we study the political struggles over which economic policies are being implemented in practice. And it's in this respect that Keynesian economic ideas and neoliberal economic ideas are linked to rather different material interests. This is a quote from the excellent book by Jim Stanford on economics for everyone. When a blue-suited bank economist appears on TV to interpret the latest GDP numbers, the reporter never mentions that this expert, in inverted commas, is ultimately paid to enhance the wealth of the shareholders of the bank. Yeah, very clearly. There's a person, an economist, presented to us as the expert, supposedly explaining how the economy works in objective reality. But actually what this person says, rather than being objective, is a reflection of the interests of the bank and its shareholders. And that, of course, already raises all kinds of questions. Yeah, why should it be that particular economic policy and not another? So in political economy, we are always asking, cui bono, who benefits? Yeah, and in that case, of course, it's the shareholders of the bank. If you are interested, I've written a blog post about the role of economics as an academic discipline. Clara is going to share with you the PowerPoint slides. And when you open them up at home, you just need to click on this link and it will get you to the blog post with that title, should you be interested. But again, just to summarize, yeah, political economy, we are analyzing political struggles over which economic policies are going to be implemented. And these struggles are open-ended. This has nothing to do with objective science. Now, quite a few of you will know this particular person. It's Yanis Varoufakis. He was the finance minister of the new Syriza government, which came to power in January 2015 in Greece. And it was his task to negotiate with the Troika, the European Union, the IMF, the European Central Bank, the particular conditions for Greece bailout agreements, for Greece's economic policy against the background of the country's sovereign debt crisis. Yanis Varoufakis is an economics, or was an economics professor before he became a finance minister. So he thought, well, I just go to Brussels, I explain to them how the economy works out there objectively, and then having given that excellent explanation, everybody will just say, oh yeah, thanks for explaining that to us. Let's do it as you suggest. And of course, Yanis Varoufakis completely misunderstood the kind of power struggle which was taking place at the European Union level. Yeah, it was not about identifying the objectively best way forward, but different economic policies were linked to different material interests. And the particular interests he represented, the Greek interests, did not reflect the interests by powerful politicians as well as powerful corporations at the European level. And all his well-meant policy proposals were simply sidelined. And in the end, he was dismissed as finance minister in Greece, and Greece had to sign yet another bailout agreement in the summer of 2015. Yeah? And he completely misunderstood that what he was dealing with was political economy, the political struggle over economic policies. It was not trying to identify objectively how the economy works. Now, Keynesianism and neoliberalism are the kind of two most talked about sets of economic ideas. And in the second section, I want to introduce some key points related to both approaches. For Keynesianism, the main goal is full employment. And they realize that because there is no automatic transfer of savings into investment, there are problems, especially in times of recession, because individuals as well as companies have lost the necessary confidence in the economy and are therefore not going to invest. If you as a worker are worried whether you will still have a job next week, you are going to postpone a particular purchase until you have more security. And this is why Keynes then stepped in and argued that in a capitalist economy, there's a key role for the state, because precisely in moments of recession, precisely in moments when there's a lack of confidence, the state has to step in via state initiatives, state spending, ensure that there are higher demand levels, ensure that you recreate confidence, and that as a result, then also the private sector and consumers are going to spend again. And then, of course, as a result of that, you end up again with full employment and a growing economy. Now, there are a whole range of economic policies from a Keynesian point of view. I'm just going to list them here on the screen. I'm not going into detail about each and all of them, but perhaps just mention a couple of them. So, for example, demand stimulation via budget deficit spending. Yeah, that's how can the state do that? Well, the Keynesian idea is that the state invests in new infrastructure projects, a new road, new train line. By doing so, the state creates employment. The state creates workers who have a disposable income, and suddenly there's investment in the economy, People go out and spend. Companies are being given contracts to work on that infrastructure project. And we start having that upswing, having a new confidence in a growing economy. And as a result, the state lifts the country out of recession. You can expand the public sector, for example, and create employment through that route. Yeah, why not establish state kindergartens? That would be one way, often tried in Scandinavian countries in the 1970s, Sweden, for example. You can devalue your currency, which makes your goods cheaper for people elsewhere. And therefore, by devaluing your currency, you engender export-led growth. Also interesting to note that from a Keynesian point of view, there was always an emphasis on a progressive taxation system. The second point from the bottom. So there was an understanding that you had to redistribute wealth. Those who earned more had to pay higher amounts of taxes. And equally interesting, there was always an understanding that actually, in order for an economy to work well, labor trade unions, coupled the employers, as well as the government, had to interact, cooperate with each other in support of these Keynesian policies. So trade unions, for example, during the 1950s and 60s, when Keynesianism held sway across most, if not all, industrialized countries, trade unions were closely integrated into economic and social policy making. However, this came to an end during the 1970s, when we had the global economic crisis reflected in the two oil price shocks. And it was during that period, when Keynesian policies didn't seem to work any longer, that neoliberal economics, first as a theory, then as concrete policies, came to the fore. We just need to think about Thatcher in Britain, as well as Ronald Reagan then in the United States, which implemented neoliberal policy in practice. These policies first were tested, however, in Pinochet after his brutal overthrow of the democratically elected Allende government in Chile. Now, neoliberal economics, the main focus is not on employment, but the focus is on price stability and low inflation. And how can we achieve that? Well, we achieve that in that the state withdraws from the market, because it is the free market which leads to higher levels of competition and therefore efficiency. And of course, more competition, more efficiency from a capitalist perspective, this leads to higher profits and general levels of wealth creation. And then eventually would also trickle down to everyone and provide the jobs. So jobs are not completely ruled out, but they are considered to be the result of an efficiently functioning free market, not hindered by any kind of state regulations. What are neoliberal policies? Well, again, we have a whole range of specific proposals. There's central bank independence. Experts, technocrats should run the monetary supply of the country. Of course, for an efficient market, the state should deregulate and liberalize the markets, including labor markets, because the less regulated, the more competition, and also therefore the more efficiency you have, according to neoliberal economists. The state has to withdraw, which means the state should not be an employer. The state should privatize state sectors. Historically, in the post-war period, coal, steel, telecommunications, these are just some of examples of nationalized industries that made perfectly sense within a Keynesian understanding, but from a neoliberal economic perspective, these companies have to be privatized. And also very different from Keynesianism, while Keynesianism considered trade unions to be important partners in ensuring an efficiently running economy, from a neoliberal point of view, trade unions and employee rights are considered to be an obstacle to the efficiently functioning of the free market, hence the cutback of trade union and employee rights. And of course, rather, why is there unemployment? What would be the position of neoliberals in this respect? For them, it's not a kind of structural factor, a lack of confidence, which needs to be resolved by the state, as the Keynesians would have it. For them, it's actually because welfare provisions are too generous. Yeah, people would not go out and work because it's much more comfortable to live on welfare provisions. And so a key aspect of neoliberal economic policy is and has always been to lower welfare provisions, to lower welfare services. So as I mentioned, the Keynesian economic set of economic policies and the neoliberal set of economic policies are the two most talked about sets of economic policies. Interestingly, Grace Blakely has just published her latest book on vulture capitalism. And I think that's a very accessible read, which moves beyond both Keynesianism and neoliberalism. So if you're interested in alternatives beyond the kind of state centrism of Keynes and the free market emphasis of the neoliberals, then Grace Blakely is the read you should take up. And very interestingly, she makes a clear and detailed argument that, yes, the state does withdraw from the market in neoliberalism, in that more and more decisions are shielded from democratic accountability. See, for example, central bank independence. However, this move of deregulating and liberalizing markets, the move of reducing trade union and employee rights, does of course require an extremely active state. So neoliberal economics doesn't imply a small state. The state is extremely interventionist into the economy, but it is so in a very different way from a Keynesian state. Okay, so we've looked at Keynesian economics, we have looked at neoliberal economics. What does that allow us to do when it comes to confronting the climate crisis? And here you see a photo of William Nordhaus, one of the key neoliberal economists. And neoliberal economists, of course, too understand that the climate crisis is a civilizational challenge we are confronting today. Their focus in approaching the crisis is on the neoliberal market mechanisms and discipline that would allow us to improve environmental outcomes. And I just want to give you here one quote from William Nordhaus. Nations must establish policies that raise the price of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions. While such steps meet resistance, who wants to take foul-tasting medicines, they are essential elements for curbing emissions, promoting low-carbon technologies, and inoculating our globe against the threat of unchecked warming. Very clearly, yeah, of course, again, the state does play a role in this, but it's rather minimal. The focus of the state here is on providing the right incentives so that the free market actors who follow their own rational utility maximizing decision making, so that those actors would then respond in a way which results in better outcomes for the climate. Keynesianists, on the other hand, they would see a much stronger role for the state in shifting us towards a more sustainable political economy. And I'm not going to talk about particular new Green Deals, but I'm just trying to outline a few key aspects which underpin all Green New Deals, I would argue, and demonstrate that these Green New Deals are much more closely aligned to Keynesian economics because they envisage a stronger role for the state. So here, in the Green New Deals, the state has to channel investment into sustainable industry. Yeah, the focus is on creating high-quality jobs in renewable energy. So there is an understanding it's not enough to provide the right incentives for the market as neoliberals would have it. Here, the focus is very clearly that actually the state has to come in and make sure the transition is going to happen in practice. And the focus is on a socially just transition based on a consensus. And this very much then also foresees a role for trade unions and employers to come together in discussions, in negotiations with the government to ensure that the transition works for everyone. There's a focus on sustainable growth. Yeah, growth is always the focus in capitalist political economies, but from a Green New Deal post-Keynesian understanding, we would focus on sustainable growth. And such a Green New Deal understanding might also include compensation payments to countries in the global south. Yeah, it is those countries which have actually least contributed to climate change, who are already worst affected by the changing climate. And so there's a focus on paying compensation to these countries so that they too can finance a just transition. And I would argue this can also be part of such a more Keynesian response to the climate crisis. However, in his book, Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the World, Jason Hickel points out that this relentless focus on economic growth is ultimately our undoing. And this focus on economic growth, as I've just mentioned, underpins both the neoliberal as well as the Keynesian responses to climate change. If we, Hickel argues, if GDP growth of 2 to 3% per year is taking place, this implies that the size of the global economy is doubling every 23 years. Now, we need to remember that already at this point in time, we are using more resources than can be replenished. Yeah, we are already going beyond the planetary boundaries as things are. Now, if we continue to double the economy, this is just not going to happen. Yeah, it is not possible, Hickel maintains, that we can absolutely decouple GDP growth from resource use. Yeah, if we double the economy, our resource usage is going to go up too, and this even more than goes beyond planetary boundaries. There is no sustainable economic growth possible. So we need to move beyond growth, and here Hickel argues in favor of degrowth as a way forward. Now, what does degrowth mean? What is it and what is it not? First of all, degrowth focuses on redistribution, and it's not an economic recession. Yeah, of course, if we confront or if we engage with people here in the UK today who rely already now on food banks, we can't tell them, oh, you need to contribute to degrowth, because they would respond to us and say, well, I'm already not managing to make ends meet as things are. Hence, I'm here at the food bank. How can I be part of degrowth? So our first important point is that we need to remember there's an enormous wealth in our society, but it's also distributed extremely unequally. So part of a degrowth strategy is also redistribution. And that means those who have to have access to food banks, actually, they need to be still allowed to grow. The main emphasis is here on reducing material and energy use. And so, of course, that means to scale down industries, but not just all industries, but the focus has to be on those industries who actually have highly destructive production in ecological terms. This, of course, refers to the automobile industry around SUVs, arms manufacturing, the production of beef, which is highly detrimental to the climate. And in a way, it also cuts back to private transportation. Growth, by contrast, is supposed to take place in those sectors which are of a more collective and socially useful matter, such as healthcare, education, care, and conviviality. So degrowth is not equal to a recession, but it means a shift of resources away from some sectors into others. And finally, of course, it is us in the global north who have to cut back our usage of material and energy. It is us who have driven climate change. Countries in the global south, by contrast, still have space to grow more within the overall global degrowth strategy. Again, very important to remember, degrowth does not mean economic recession. These are very different processes. Of course, and this is also why I ask you as trade union members from Unite, is degrowth actually a feasible strategy? Can it be a feasible strategy within the labor movement? Unite organizes many workers, especially in areas which would be those where cutbacks would have to occur: arms manufacturing, fossil fuel industry. How can we engage with workers in these sectors around the notion of degrowth? At the minimum, I would argue, is that we need to be arguing for a just transition to degrowth. So we need to be able to offer those workers who are going to lose their jobs in these ecologically destructive industries, we would need to be able to offer them alternative quality jobs. Now, in the autumn of 2022, the climate activist Alan Simpson gave a lecture series at Nottingham University on avoiding the apocalypse. And he pointed out that, well, degrowth would be very difficult to engage people with. So he preferred to focus on the notion of circularity, which implies that we only take out from the earth as much as we then also later on give back. So we need to focus on circularity. So what we use is also going to be replenished afterwards. Again, for resource, when you have the PowerPoint slides, if you click here on avoiding the apocalypse, I've implemented a link, and that gets you to 6 summary videos covering the 6 lectures Alan Simpson gave back in the autumn of 2022. And they're all full of positive examples of what we can do proactively in confronting the climate crisis. Now, this brings me to the end of this presentation, but I just want to present you with one final quote from Jim Stanford. I believe that studying economic history and the history of economic thought is an inherently subversive undertaking. It refutes the assumption that capitalism is natural and hence everlasting, and the related claim that economics is the neutral technical study of that natural everlasting economy. And it's very important to contest the notion that economics would be something just for experts, that economics would be something we cannot understand. Yeah, we all, with a bit of work, but we all can participate in economics discussions. We all need to participate in economics discussions if we really want to confront civilizational challenges such as climate crisis. So let's not be fooled by these opposing experts telling us how the economy seems to work in the objectively in the society out there. Let's question the ideas being put forward. Let's trace the material interest which would benefit from them, and let's make sure in collective discussion that we can move towards an alternative course of history. Thank you very much.